What does it take for a CEO to detonate a $200 million deal while cruising at 30,000 feet? It wasn't a stock market crash. It wasn't a competitor's surprise maneuver. It was 4 simple, condescending words from a flight attendant who had no idea who she was talking to. This seat is reserved. This isn't just a story about a bad flight. It's a story about the moment quiet dignity met blatant disrespect, and how a single email sent on spotty airplane Wi-Fi triggered a corporate avalanche of karma so brutal it sent shockwaves through an entire industry. The soft, ambient glow of the Aura Airlines Polaris first-class cabin was designed to soothe. It was a carefully curated world of muted greys, brushed chrome, and the gentle clinking of crystal on polished faux marble surfaces. For most of its occupants on the transatlantic flight from London Heathrow to JFK, it was a sanctuary, a 7-hour reprieve from the chaos of the world below. For Justin Thorne, CEO of Nexus Flow Logistics, it was supposed to be a mobile office, a final moment of quiet contemplation before he landed in New York to sign the most transformative deal in his company's history. Justin was a man carved from determination. At 42, he possessed a stillness that was often mistaken for aloofness. It wasn't. It was the hard-won composure of a man who had built a billion-dollar empire from a single van and a revolutionary software algorithm he'd coded in his cramped apartment a decade earlier. Nexus Flow wasn't just a logistics company. It was the invisible circulatory system for hundreds of global brands, promising and delivering efficiency with near-perfect precision. Justin was the architect of that perfection. He was dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored charcoal grey travel blazer over a black t-shirt, the unofficial uniform of the modern tech mogul who had outgrown the need for suits. He had specifically booked seat 1A. It was a ritual. On the precipice of every major deal, he secured 1A. It offered privacy the first service and the first exit. It was a small psychological anchor, a point of control in a world of variables. This trip was more significant than any before. The deal awaiting his signature was a $200 million strategic partnership with Aura Airlines itself. Nexus Flow would overhaul Aura's entire global cargo division, integrating their predictive logistics software to streamline everything from baggage handling to high-value freight. It was a quantum leap, promising to balloon Nexus Flow's valuation and cement Aura's dominance in air cargo. The irony that he was flying with his future business partner to finalize the agreement was not lost on him. He saw it as a good omen, a final real-world due diligence check on their consumer-facing operations. He found his seat, the spacious pod at the very front of the aircraft. He slid his leather briefcase under the ottoman and began to settle in the familiar pre-flight hum, a welcome soundtrack to his thoughts. He was mentally rehearsing his talking points for the final meeting with Aura's board, envisioning the press conference, the handshake with their CEO, Richard Sterling. "Excuse me." "Sir." The voice was crisp professional, but with an underlying edge of impatience. Justin looked up. A flight attendant stood before him, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe tight bun. Her name tag read Brenda. She had a practiced plastic smile that didn't reach her eyes, which were scanning him with a look that fell somewhere between confusion and disapproval. "Yes," Justin replied, his voice calm and even. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm afraid there's been a mistake. This seat is reserved," she said, her tone implying the mistake was his. Justin blinked slowly. He held up his boarding pass, the bold print clearly showing Thorne M. and seat 1A. "I believe this is my assigned seat." "One here." Brenda glanced at the boarding pass but didn't truly look at it. Her eyes flicked from the ticket to his face, then to his casual attire. It was a micro-expression, a flicker of judgment so fast most would miss it. But Justin had built his career on reading people and systems. He saw it plain as day. The calculation, the assumption. He wasn't in a suit. He wasn't the typical grey-haired executive she probably expected in this seat. Therefore, he must be the one in error. "Yes, I see what your ticket says," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, as if explaining a complex concept to a child. "But the system often has glitches. This particular seat is being held for one of our top-tier frequent flyers. It's a courtesy we extend. There's another seat for you, 4D. Seat 4D was a middle seat in the last row of the first-class cabin. It was objectively the worst seat in the section, next to the galley and the lavatories. It was the seat one gets on a last-minute booking, not the one a CEO pays a 5-figure sum for." Justin kept his composure. Outward displays of anger were inefficient. "There must be a misunderstanding," he said, his voice remaining level. "I booked this seat 2 months ago. I am also a top-tier flyer with your airline. Perhaps you could double-check your manifest." Brenda's plastic smile tightened. "Sir, I don't need to check the manifest. I was personally informed by the purser. The seat is reserved. I'm going to have to ask you to move to 4D now, so we can continue our boarding process." The confrontation was quiet, but it was starting to draw glances from the other passengers settling into their pods. A man in a pinstripe suit in 2B peered over his newspaper. A woman in 1C subtly angled her phone as if pretending to text. Justin felt a familiar hot sting of indignation, an emotion he hadn't truly felt since his early days struggling for funding, when venture capitalists would dismiss him before he even finished his pitch. "I'd like to speak with the purser, please," Justin stated. It was not a request. Brenda's composure finally cracked a flash of genuine annoyance in her eyes. "The purser is busy with pre-flight checks. Sir, please don't make this difficult. We have a schedule to keep." Making this difficult, Justin said, his voice dropping a decibel, yet gaining immeasurable weight, is insisting a paying passenger vacate a seat they legally purchased and are currently occupying based on an unverified verbal instruction. "Get the purser." Defeated by his unshakable calm, Brenda spun on her heel and marched toward the galley. A few moments later, she returned with an older woman whose name tag identified her as Susan Cabin Purser. Susan had the air of a career professional, someone who had seen it all. Justin felt a brief glimmer of hope that logic would prevail. The hope died quickly. Sir Susan began her tone weary, as if Justin were the last in a long line of problems. Brenda explained the situation. "We have a very important passenger, a platinum medallion guest who was promised this seat. It's an internal courtesy." "I am also a platinum medallion guest," Justin said, pulling the sleek metallic card from his wallet and placing it on the armrest next to his boarding pass. "And my partnership with Aura, which is pending final signature tomorrow, is valued at $200 million. I suspect that might qualify me as a very important passenger. Now, are you going to check your manifest, or do we need to escalate this further?" He didn't want to pull rank. He despised the "do you know who I am" attitude, but he was being pushed his simple request for verification treated as an affront. He was testing them. He was testing the very culture of the company he was about to integrate with. Susan and Brenda exchanged a look. It was a look of shared frustration, not at their error, but at his persistence. Susan finally sighed, picked up the cabin phone, and dialed a number. She spoke in low, hushed tones, her back to Justin. While she was on the phone, a young man in his late 20s bustled down the aisle. He was dressed in trendy, expensive streetwear, a Balenciaga hoodie, and pristine white sneakers that probably cost more than a flight in economy. He had AirPods in his ears and was looking at his phone, completely oblivious to the silent standoff. He stopped at row 1, looked at the seat number, and then at Justin. "Oh, excuse me, you're in my seat," he said, not with malice, but with the breezy, unthinking entitlement of someone who has never been told no. Brenda's face lit up with relief. "Cody, here you are. We were just sorting it out for you." She turned to Justin, her expression now one of triumph. "Sir, as you can see, the passenger for this seat is here. Please, move to 4D. This was it, the moment of decision. Justin looked at the young man, Cody, who was now impatiently tapping his foot. He looked at Brenda's smug face and Susan's exhausted resignation. He saw the system in action. It wasn't a glitch. It was a feature. Personal favors trumping process. Connections overriding contracts. Disrespect masquerading as policy. And beneath it all, the ugly, unspoken assumption that he, Justin Thorne, didn't belong here. He knew what he had to do. The $200 million deal wasn't just about software and cargo. It was about partnership, trust, shared values. And in that moment, Aura Airlines had failed the most basic test. Slowly, deliberately, Justin Thorne stood up. He didn't look at Brenda or Cody. He picked up his briefcase, his face an unreadable mask of calm. "Fine," he said, the word hanging in the air like a death sentence. He walked past them, down the aisle to the cramped, undesirable seat, 4D, the eyes of the other first-class passengers following him. He sat down, the proximity to the bustling galley already an irritation. But he wasn't thinking about the discomfort. He was thinking about contracts, about breach of faith, about the fundamental incompatibility of his meticulously ordered world with the casual chaos and disrespect he had just witnessed. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out his laptop. He paid the exorbitant fee for the in-flight Wi-Fi, the connection painfully slow, but stable enough. He opened his email client, and he began to type. The email was a work of art in corporate lethality. Justin Thorne did not write with emotion. He wrote with the precision of a surgeon and the finality of a judge. His fingers moved across the keyboard with a steady, unhurried rhythm, a stark contrast to the storm of calculation swirling in his mind. This wasn't revenge. It was risk mitigation. A company that treats its highest value customers with such casual disdain is a company with a rotten core. A partner that allows personal whims to override contractual obligations is a liability. The recipient list was a targeted strike. He addressed it to his own board of directors, his CFO, his chief legal officer, and his VP of operations. But the crucial additions were on the CC line: Richard Sterling, CEO of Aura Airlines, Catherine Chen, Aura's chief financial officer, and David Miller, their head of global cargo operations, the very man he was supposed to be celebrating with tomorrow. The subject line was deceptively simple, yet designed to trigger immediate panic in a corporate inbox. Subject: urgent re-evaluation of Nexus Flow Aura Airlines strategic partnership. The body of the email was concise and devastatingly professional. Team Effective, immediately, please place a hold on all proceedings related to the Project Polaris partnership with Aura Airlines. The final signing, scheduled for tomorrow, August 8th, is indefinitely postponed. This directive is based on a first-hand customer service and operational integrity failure I am currently experiencing on Aura Flight 201 LHR to JFK. While specifics are better discussed in a secure environment, the incident involved a fundamental breach of contract and a corporate culture that appears to be misaligned with the core principles of reliability and respect that define Nexus Flow. Our partnership model is predicated on absolute trust and systemic integrity. Today's events have raised serious red flags regarding Aura's ability to uphold these standards, not just in their consumer-facing product, but potentially in the complex cargo and logistics operations we were set to overhaul. I have concluded that moving forward without a comprehensive reassessment of our potential partners' internal culture and operational protocols would be an unacceptable risk to our brand and our shareholders. Aura colleagues, CC'd here, I apologize for this abrupt communication. I believe you will find the root cause of this decision originated with the cabin crew of your current Flight 201. I will be unavailable for discussion until after landing. My legal team will be in touch to schedule a preliminary conversation. Regards, Justin Thorne, CEO Nexus Flow Logistics sent from my flight. He read it over once, a cold satisfaction settling over him. It was perfect. It was impersonal, framed entirely in the language of business risk and shareholder duty. It gave nothing away about the personal humiliation, yet it pointed the finger with unerring accuracy. The phrase root cause originated with the cabin crew was a corporate hand grenade, and he had just pulled the pin. He clicked send. The little icon spun for a few agonizingly long seconds before confirming the message was away. He closed the laptop, placed it in his briefcase, and leaned his head back against the seat, closing his eyes. He had just detonated a $200 million deal. Now he would wait for the shockwave. He didn't have to wait long. On the ground in Aura Airlines' gleaming Chicago headquarters, it was mid-morning. The email landed in Richard Sterling's inbox like a bomb. Sterling, a CEO, known for his booming voice and back-slapping demeanor, was in a quarterly review meeting. His executive assistant, a sharp young woman named Chloe, saw the email, read the first 2 lines, and knew. Her face went pale. She strode into the boardroom and placed her phone displaying the email in front of Sterling. The CEO's ruddy, cheerful face went slack. He read the email, then read it again, his eyes widening in disbelief. He stood up so abruptly, his chair screeched backwards. "Excuse me," he barked, leaving a boardroom full of bewildered VPs. In his office, he got Catherine Chen and David Miller on an emergency conference call. The panic was palpable. "What the hell is happening on Flight 201? Sterling roared. "Who is Justin Thorne, and why is he on that flight?" David Miller, the cargo chief, sounded panicked. "Richard Justin Thorne is Nexus Flow. He's the CEO. He's the guy we've been courting for a year. He's on his way to New York to sign the damn deal. What does he mean? Customer service failure." An operations manager was quickly patched in. Passenger manifests were pulled. Seat assignments were checked. In less than 5 minutes, the horrifying picture became clear, so the manager said, his voice trembling. "It appears Mr. Thorne, who was ticketed in seat 1A, was moved to 4D by the cabin crew." "Moved? Why in God's name was he moved?" Sterling yelled. "It appears the crew held seat 1A for another passenger, sir, a Mr. Cody Harrington." And who Sterling asked, his voice, now dangerously low, "is Cody Harrington." A few seconds of frantic typing. "He's a junior marketing manager in our leisure travel division, sir. His father is on the board of one of our catering suppliers." The line went silent. Richard Sterling felt a cold dread creep up his spine. A $200 million partnership, a year of negotiations, the future of their cargo division, all potentially torched by a flight attendant and a purser giving a favor to the nepo baby of a catering contractor. "Get me the captain of that flight," Sterling commanded. "Now, use the ACAR system. Tell him to get the purser. Tell her she needs to fix this. Tell her the CEO of the damn airline is ordering her to fix it. And find out the name of the flight attendant who caused this. I want her name." Up in the air, the atmosphere of calm had been shattered, but only for the crew. Susan the purser was in the galley when the printer for the aircraft communications addressing and reporting system ACARS whirred to life. It was the digital link to the ground usually used for maintenance reports or weather updates. A direct message from the CEO's office mid-flight was almost unheard of. She tore off the printed message. The text was terse and stripped of all pleasantries. Urgent MSG from CEO R. Sterling. Passenger Justin Thorne in 4D is VIP partner. Grave error. Resolve immediately. Offer apology and move back to 1A. Confirm via return MSG. Failure is not an option. Susan felt the blood drain from her face. She read it again. The name Justin Thorne now burning in her mind. The man with the quiet voice and the platinum card. The man who had mentioned a multi-million-dollar partnership. She had dismissed it as a bluff, an exaggeration from an entitled passenger. She had sided with Brenda's judgment. She turned to Brenda, who was wiping down a counter, still radiating an air of smug satisfaction. Brenda Susan whispered, her voice tight with panic. "We have a problem. A very, very big problem." She showed Brenda the message. The color drained from Brenda's face, as well replaced by a ghastly, chalky white. The smugness evaporated, replaced by raw fear. He wasn't lying," Brenda stammered. "No, he wasn't." Susan snapped the adrenaline of terror, sharpening her tone. "The CEO knows. He knows we moved him. We need to fix this." The two women, now a portrait of dawning horror, walked down the aisle toward seat 4D. Their previous confidence was gone, replaced by a desperate fawning anxiety. Justin saw them coming. He had been expecting them. He had his noise-cancelling headphones on, listening to a podcast, but he saw their approach, their panicked expressions, their stiff, apologetic posture. He calmly paused the podcast and removed the headphones. Mr. Thorne, Susan began, her voice trembling slightly. "There has been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. I am so profoundly sorry. We were given some incorrect information. Your seat 1A is of course available. We would be honored if you would move back." Brenda stood beside her, looking mortified. "Yes, sir. My deepest apologies. I completely mishandled the situation. Please allow us to escort you back to your seat. Can we get you a bottle of Dom Perignon, some caviar? Anything at all. It's on us, of course." Justin looked from Susan's panicked face to Brenda's terrified one. He saw no genuine remorse for their actions, only fear of the consequences. They weren't sorry for disrespecting him. They were sorry they had disrespected someone important, and that was a crucial distinction. He gave them a small, cold smile. An hour ago, he said, his voice soft but carrying clearly in the quiet cabin, I was a customer who had a problem. That was the time to offer a solution. But now it's a bit more complicated than that, isn't it? He gestured vaguely toward the front of the plane. What about Mr. Harrington? Is he no longer a very important passenger? Susan stammered. We'll find another seat for him, sir. That's not your concern, I see Justin said, nodding slowly. So the rules change depending on who is making the phone call from the ground. That's very interesting. It speaks volumes about your operational integrity. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Thank you for the offer, he continued, his tone one of final dismissal. But I'm quite comfortable here. I've already had my meal. I have my work. Moving me back now would be disruptive. As for the champagne, no thank you. I have a clear head for business in the morning. He put his headphones back on, turned his head toward the window, and closed his eyes, a clear signal that the conversation was over. Susan and Brenda were left standing in the aisle, frozen in humiliation. They had been rebuffed. Their frantic attempt to put the genie back in the bottle had failed spectacularly. Every passenger who was paying attention had witnessed their groveling and his calm, surgical rejection. They shuffled back to the galley, their careers flashing before their eyes. The rest of the flight stretched before them, an eternity of silent, agonizing dread. Justin Thorne didn't need champagne. He had already sent the most expensive message he had ever composed. The initial gentle tilt of the aircraft was the first sign that their 7-hour sanctuary was ending. As Flight 201 began its long, graceful descent into the sprawling urban galaxy of New York, the mood in the Polaris first class cabin subtly shifted. The somnolent peace of cruising altitude gave way to the quiet rustle of passengers waking, packing away books, and tidying their personal spaces. For most, it was the routine conclusion of a journey. For the crew in the forward galley and the man in seat 4D, it was the prelude to a reckoning. Justin Thorne felt the change in pressure in his ears, but his internal state remained one of unshakable calm. He hadn't slept. Instead, he had spent the last few hours in a state of intense, focused meditation, not on the insult he had endured, but on the cascading consequences of the email he had sent. He was a systems thinker, and his mind was already mapping out the new reality. He visualized the frantic conference calls at Aura's headquarters, the panicked search through manifests and personnel files. He also charted the necessary course for Nexus flow. He would need to brief his board task his legal team with extrication protocols, and most importantly, immediately begin vetting alternative partners. The anger, that hot flash of personal indignation he'd felt initially, had long since cooled into something far more potent, strategic certainty. He had not acted out of pique. He had acted to protect his creation. He had diagnosed a terminal illness in a potential partner and had amputated the limb before the infection could spread. In the galley, the atmosphere was thick with a silent, suffocating dread. Brenda and Susan moved with Ajang Yingde robotic efficiency, collecting glasses and preparing the cabin for arrival. They avoided eye contact with each other, and most pointedly with seat 4D. Every slight bump of turbulence was a jolt to their frayed nerves. Susan the purser kept replaying the scene in her head, her own words echoing with horrifying clarity. It's an internal courtesy. She had defended a corrupt system out of professional laziness, and in doing so had likely ended her career. Brenda was a mess of raw panic. Her mind raced with desperate, illogical hopes. Maybe he'll have a change of heart. Maybe the CEO will understand. Maybe it will all blow over. But deep down, she knew. She had picked the wrong person. She had judged a book by its cover, and the book turned out to be the author of a story in which she was now the villain. As the plane broke through the cloud cover, revealing the geometric sprawl of Long Island below the captain's voice, usually a comforting baritone crackled through the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, a quick announcement as we approach our final destination. After we have arrived at the gate and the seatbelt sign has been switched off, we kindly request that all passengers remain in their seats for just a few moments. We have a special request from our ground operations team, who need to board the aircraft to speak with a passenger before deplaning commences. Thank you for your cooperation. A confused murmur rippled through the entire plane. In economy, passengers speculated about a medical emergency or a security issue. In first class, however, the few who had witnessed the earlier drama knew. All eyes subtly shifted towards Justin Thorne. He in turn showed no reaction whatsoever. He simply gazed out the window as the plane glided over Jamaica Bay, his face a mask of placid neutrality. The landing was flawless, a gentle kiss of rubber on tarmac. As the aircraft taxied towards the terminal, Justin methodically packed the last of his things into his sleek leather briefcase. He clicked it shut with a soft, definitive snap. The sound seemed to echo in the tense silence of the cabin. The moment the jet bridge connected with a dull thud, the cabin door swung open. The scene that greeted the crew was one that would be seared into their memories. It wasn't a junior ground agent with a clipboard. It was a corporate firing squad in tailored suits. Leading the procession was Richard Sterling, the CEO of Aura Airlines, his face a grim tableau of forced sincerity and profound anxiety. His silver hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it for hours. Flanking him were Catherine Chen, the steely chief financial officer, whose tight expression conveyed the terror of a plummeting stock price, and David Miller, the head of global cargo operations. Miller looked pale and nauseous, the physical embodiment of a man watching his career-defining project evaporate before his very eyes. The sight of them caused Susan to physically recoil, while Brenda seemed to shrink her face, turning a ghastly shade of white. In seat 1A, Cody Harrington, who had spent the flight blissfully unaware, finally looked up from his phone, annoyed by the delay. His eyes widened as he recognized the CEO. A slow, sickening wave of comprehension began to wash over his entitled features as he started belatedly to connect the silent, tense flight with the presence of the company's entire senior leadership. The seatbelt sign pinged off. A few eager passengers started to stand, only to be waved back down by a frantic Susan. Justin, however, remained seated. He made no move to stand, no attempt to claim the special attention that was so clearly for him. He would deplane like any other passenger on his own time. He made them wait. The silent seconds stretched into a minute, each one a fresh turn of the screw for the waiting executives. Finally, after the passengers in the rows ahead of him had gathered their belongings, Justin stood. He smoothed his travel blazer, picked up his briefcase, and began his slow, deliberate walk down the aisle. He walked past the mortified crew, past a now petrified Cody Harrington, and stopped just before the executives at the threshold of the aircraft. Richard Sterling lunged forward, his hand outstretched, a desperate high-wattage smile plastered across his face. Justin Richard Sterling. On behalf of the entire Aura Airlines family, I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry I am. What you experienced today was an inexcusable, embarrassing, catastrophic failure on our part. It is not who we are. It is not what we stand for. Justin looked at the proffered hand, held it in his gaze for a beat, and then pointedly ignored it, his own hands remaining firmly on his briefcase. He lifted his eyes to meet the CEO's. His voice when he spoke was not loud, but it cut through the airplane's recycled air with the chilling precision of a scalpel. "Mr. Sterling," he began, his tone even and devoid of emotion. "With all due respect, I believe what I experienced today is exactly who you are. The data doesn't lie. You are a company where established protocols are overridden by personal favors. You are a company where a paid contract is viewed as a suggestion. You are a company where customer respect is not a default setting, but a conditional privilege awarded based on a flight attendant's uninformed prejudice." Sterling's hand dropped to his side, his smile faltering into a pained grimace. "Justin, please," he implored, his voice dropping. "This was an aberration, the fault of a few individuals who demonstrated appalling judgment. We will make it right. I give you my personal ironclad guarantee. Those responsible will face the most severe consequences. Their careers with this airline are over." Justin's gaze flickered for a fraction of a second toward the galley where Brenda was visibly trembling. "Firing them is the easy part, Mr. Sterling. That's just pruning a weed. My concern is with the soil it grew in. A healthy corporate culture doesn't produce weeds like this. What I saw was a symptom of a systemic illness." David Miller, seeing his legacy project slipping away, stepped forward, his voice pleading. "Justin, our teams have worked on this for a year. Our systems are ready for integration. The projections are transformative for both of us. We can't let all that work, all that potential fall apart, Because of one seating arrangement on one flight, Justin turned his cool gaze on Miller. David, you and I both built our careers on data. And this isn't about a seat. It's about a data point, a single clarifying and extraordinarily expensive data point. My entire company, my entire fortune, is built on predictive analysis. We predict supply chain disruptions. We predict market movements. We predict system failures. And the data I collected on this flight allows me to make a new, very confident prediction. A long-term partnership with Aura Airlines would be a catastrophic failure. The operational sloppiness and cultural disrespect I saw in your premier cabin is a terrifying indicator of what likely lies deeper within your organization. If this is how you treat the front end, I can't even imagine the risks lurking in your back end in the cargo holds and logistics chains I was about to entrust with my client's fortunes. He adjusted his grip on his briefcase, signaling his intent to leave. Catherine Chen, the CFO, made one last desperate appeal to pragmatism. Mr. Thorne, think of the shareholder value. For both of us, there are hundreds of millions of dollars on the table. Justin finally allowed a flicker of something, not quite a smile, but a shadow of one to cross his lips. Ms. Chen, I am the largest shareholder in my company. My primary duty is to protect its value, and its value is intrinsically linked to its reputation for flawless execution and unwavering integrity. Integrating with a partner who has demonstrated a fundamental lack of both would be the single greatest violation of my fiduciary duty. The $200 million we would have made is nothing compared to the billions in brand equity we would risk by associating with you. He then took a deliberate step onto the jet bridge, leaving the three most powerful people in Aura Airlines standing in stunned silence. He paused at the top of the ramp. My car is waiting. My legal team has your contact information. They will be in touch tomorrow to begin the formal process of dissolving our preliminary agreements and ensuring the complete secure separation of our integrated data. Good day. Without another glance back, Justin Thorne walked away, his calm, unhurried footsteps echoing down the sterile corridor. He left behind him a scene of corporate carnage, a CEO whose tenure was now measured in days, two senior executives staring into a professional abyss, and a cabin crew whose lives had been irrevocably broken by their own small, ugly actions. The moment Justin was out of sight, Richard Sterling's mask of contrition dissolved into one of pure fury. He spun around, his face purple with rage. "Security!" he roared at a nearby ground manager. "Take them, the purser and the flight attendant. Conference room Delta. Now, confiscate their phones and IDs. They don't speak to anyone but legal. And you," he snarled, pointing a trembling finger at a shell-shocked Cody Harrington. "You're coming with me. You're going to tell me exactly how you became important enough to cost this company $200 million. The investigation was not an inquiry. It was an autopsy. Within the hour, a war room had been established at Aura's JFK corporate offices. The legal department, spurred by Sterling's volcanic rage, descended with the grim efficiency of a special operations unit. Brenda Jenkins and Susan were sequestered in separate windowless rooms. Under the harsh fluorescent glare and the relentless, methodical questioning of Aura's top corporate lawyers, their stories crumbled. Brenda stripped of her pride, and authority began with defiant justifications about glitches and discretion. But when the lawyers presented her with printouts of flight manifests from the past year, showing a suspicious pattern of last-minute courtesy upgrades, she broke down. In a torrent of tears, she confessed to the entire sordid scheme, the secret list of friends, the cash tips, the deliberate targeting of passengers she profiled as unlikely to cause a scene. Susan's interrogation was less dramatic, but equally damning. She pleaded ignorance of the cash transactions, but she could not deny the pattern of negligence. The lawyers tore her defense of trusting my senior crew to shreds, reframing it as a willful abdication of oversight responsibility and fostering a culture of unaccountability. She had been the guardian of the airline's standards in the cabin, and she had let a corrupt subordinate run wild. Late that night, a thick, spiral-bound report was placed on Richard Sterling's desk. It contained transcripts of the confessions, a detailed analysis of 2 years of customer complaints that corroborated Brenda's pattern, and a summary of the financial kickbacks. It was a complete and utter indictment of their culture. Justin Thorne hadn't just diagnosed the illness from 30,000 feet. He had, in his calm and devastating assessment, been absolutely, unequivocally right. The retribution that followed was not the swift, singular strike of a lightning bolt, but the slow grinding and absolute power of a tectonic plate shifting. It reshaped landscapes, toppled mountains, and left valleys of ruin where arrogance once stood. For the individuals who had set the disaster in motion, the karma was personal, brutal, and meticulously tailored to their transgressions. Brenda Jenkins was the first to be summoned. She arrived at the Aura corporate offices the next morning, clinging to a desperate sliver of hope that her 2 decades of service might earn her some leniency. She was escorted not to a familiar supervisor's office, but to a sterile, anonymous conference room on the executive floor. Inside a vice president of human resources she had never met sat beside a stony-faced corporate lawyer. There was no small talk. The VP slid a folder across the polished table. Ms. Jenkins, the VP, began her voice, devoid of any warmth. The findings of yesterday's internal investigation, which you participated in, have concluded that you engaged in gross misconduct. This includes, but is not limited to, breach of company policy, willful discrimination against passengers, and the solicitation of unauthorized payments for personal financial gain. She paused, letting the weight of the formal charges settle in the silent room. As such, your employment with Aura Airlines is terminated, effective immediately. Brenda felt the air leave her lungs. Terminated. After 22 years, it was a mistake. I panicked. The lawyer spoke for the first time, his voice like ice. Ms. Jenkins, your mistake was a systematic, prejudiced scheme that has exposed this company to catastrophic financial and reputational damage. There is no appeal. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you. Due to the nature of the termination, for cause you forfeit all severance flight benefits and stock options. A security officer will now escort you from the building. As if on cue, a uniformed guard entered the room. The final humiliation was the sight of the HR VP taking a pair of scissors and cutting Brenda's employee ID in half. The crisp snap of the plastic was the sound of her world breaking apart. Susan the purser was dealt a different, more insidious punishment. The legal team determined that firing a long-serving, union-protected purser without direct proof of her involvement in the financial scheme would be a protracted battle. Instead, they opted for a death by 1,000 cuts. She was called into her fleet manager's office and formally demoted to the rank of junior flight attendant. Her senior purser wings were stripped from her uniform. Her salary was slashed by nearly half. Most cruelly, she was placed on indefinite probation and reassigned to the reserve pool, meaning she would now fly the routes no one else wanted: turbulent red-eyes to Omaha multi-leg trips through the Midwest and last-minute substitutions on understaffed flights. Her first flight in her new role was a week later, a late-night departure to Cleveland. She found herself taking orders from a lead flight attendant she had personally trained a decade earlier. The looks from her new colleagues were a mixture of pity and thinly veiled scorn. They knew the story. The entire airline knew. She was no longer Susan the respected purser. She was a cautionary tale, a ghost haunting the galleys, forced to serve coffee and pick up trash in the very cabin she once commanded, a constant walking reminder of the devastating cost of looking the other way. For Cody Harrington, the karma was swift and absolute. The brutal dressing down from a furious Richard Sterling at the airport was only the beginning. His father called him the next morning. The voice on the other end was not that of a doting parent, but of a ruthless businessman whose bottom line had been threatened. I just got off the phone with what's left of my contact at Aura. His father's voice boomed cold and sharp. They're auditing our catering contract. Auditing because of you, because you couldn't just fly like a normal person. You had to wave your connection around for a better seat. Dad, I didn't know who the guy was, Cody stammered. That's the point, you idiot. You're not supposed to know. You're supposed to keep your head down. Your little stunt, your $100 bribe to some flight attendant is going to cost me millions. You are a liability. The line went dead. An hour later, Cody received an email. His corporate credit cards tied to the family business had been cancelled. He was fired from his make-believe marketing job, and his access to the family trust was suspended. He was adrift, stripped of the status and wealth that had defined him, a pariah to the one person whose approval he had always taken for granted. But the individual consequences were merely tremors. The earthquake was yet to come. Inside Aura's legal department, a junior counsel named Daniel had been part of the team compiling the final report. He had sat through the debriefing where a desperate Richard Sterling and his team had discussed strategies not of root cause reform, but of narrative containment, how to frame the incident as an isolated case and bury the report to prevent wider discovery. Disgusted by the hypocrisy, Daniel felt a duty that superseded his employment contract. That night, working from his home computer, he compiled a secure, anonymous file. It contained the flight manifest, a summary of Brenda's and Susan's confessions, the data on the pattern of ignored complaints, and a non-attributable transcript of Justin Thorne's surgical refusal on the jet bridge. He attached it to an encrypted email and sent it to a name he knew well from the papers, Alana Rodriguez, a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal, known for her tenacity in exposing corporate malfeasance. The email landed in Alana's inbox just before midnight. Her reporter's instincts screamed. This wasn't just a disgruntled customer story. It was a perfect storm of racism, corporate corruption, and high-stakes business drama. She and her team worked feverishly for 36 hours, verifying the details through back channels and confirming with sources close to Nexus Flow that a major partnership had indeed been scuttled following a flight incident. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, hitting the journal's front page online. The headline was a masterpiece of destructive elegance, culture of contempt, how a CEO's humiliation at 30,000 feet grounded a $200 million deal and exposed the rot at Aura Airlines. The article was a devastating, detailed account of the entire affair. It painted Justin Thorne as a figure of immense dignity and principle. It laid out Brenda's scheme in humiliating detail. It quoted internal sources on the systemic failure to address prior complaints. Most damningly, it included a line from the anonymous leaker. The issue wasn't one bad apple. It was a poisoned tree, and management only cared when someone with an axe showed up. The public reaction was instantaneous and explosive. Boycott Aura erupted on social media, fueled by outrage and shared stories of similar experiences. Justin Thorne became an overnight folk hero in the business world and beyond. The story was picked up by every major news network. Aura's booking system saw a catastrophic 40% drop in new reservations within 24 hours. Their stock, which had already been shaky, went into a freefall. It plummeted 18% by the closing bell, vaporizing over $1 billion of shareholder value in a single day. The Aura board of directors convened an emergency video conference. The faces of the powerful board members were grim, their anger palpable. Richard Sterling, looking haggard and broken, tried to assure them he could contain the damage that his newly announced diversity initiatives would placate the public. He was cut off by the board's lead independent director, a formidable retired general. "Richard, it's too late for containment. You didn't just lose a partnership. You've made this company a global symbol of arrogance and incompetence. You presided over a culture that allowed this to fester, and you failed to grasp the magnitude of the threat until it had already blown up in your face. The market has spoken. Your leadership has lost all credibility. The vote was a mere formality. Richard Sterling was forced to tender his resignation, effective immediately. He was dethroned not by a competitor, but by his own company's decayed culture. Amid the chaos, Nexus Flow Logistics operated with chilling composure. The day after Sterling's resignation, they issued a formal press release. It was classic Justin Thorne, concise, principled, and devastating. Nexus Flow Logistics has formally terminated all partnership negotiations with Aura Airlines. Our business is built upon a foundation of absolute trust, systemic integrity, and universal respect for all people. Recent events have made it clear that Aura Airlines does not currently share these core values. We can only enter into strategic alliances with partners who demonstrate an unwavering and authentic commitment to operational excellence and human dignity. We wish them the best as they address their internal challenges. The statement was lauded as a masterclass in corporate statesmanship. But Justin wasn't finished. This was not just about cancelling a bad deal. It was about making a better one. 3 months later, as Aura Airlines was still mired in lawsuits and a public relations nightmare, Nexus Flow held a major press conference. Standing beside Justin Thorne was the celebrated CEO of Velocity Air Aura's most nimble and respected competitor, an airline renowned for its modern fleet, innovative technology, and consistently high rankings in employee and customer satisfaction. They announced a new groundbreaking strategic partnership valued at over $250 million to create the most advanced air logistics network in the world. The contrast was stark and intentional. Aura was old, corrupt, and crumbling. Velocity was new, principled, and ascending. The message was clear. Justin Thorne hadn't just dodged a bullet. He had traded up, turning a moment of profound disrespect into the single greatest business opportunity in his company's history. He never spoke of the incident on Flight 201 again. He didn't have to. The world had watched him turn a simple seat assignment into a throne, proving that in the modern world, the ultimate power doesn't belong to those who make the most noise, but to those whose principles have the most weight. This story serves as a powerful real-world reminder that our actions, no matter how small they seem, can trigger consequences of unimaginable scale. It's a testament to the fact that true character is revealed not in how we treat the powerful, but how we treat those we think have no power. Justin Thorne's quiet stand was a victory not just for him, but for everyone who has ever been judged, dismissed, or disrespected. It's a lesson in corporate karma, showing that a culture of disrespect is not just morally wrong, it's financially catastrophic. If this story about principle over profit and dignity, over discrimination, resonated with you, please hit that like button to help it reach more people. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories of accountability and justice, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Most importantly, leave a comment below. Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone took a quiet stand that had a huge impact. I read everyone. Thank you for listening.